Erev Tov, good evening, everyone. Thank you to all of you for joining us for our town hall meeting. It's good to see everyone. As has become our practice, we do have a full agenda, but we begin every meeting with tefillah. I'd like to say a parak of Tehillim for the refuah shlema of all those who are ill, for the continued good health of those who are in good health, and for our collective wisdom, the wisdom of our leaders to be able to lead us through these challenging circumstances. We will say Tehillim Perek Kuf Chaf Aleph. Shir Lama'alo Tesainai Lehari Me'ayin Yavo Ezri. Ezri Me'im Adonai Yosei Shamayim Haaretz. Al Yitein Lamot Raglecha Al Yanum Shamrecha. Hinei Lo Yanum B'Lo Yishan Shomer Yisrael. Adonai Shamrecha, Adonai Tzilcha, Yad Yaminecha. Yoma Mashemesh Lo Yakeka, V'Yareach V'Loila. Adonai Yishmarcha Mikol Ra, Yishmor Es Nafshecha. Adonai Yishmor Tzeitzcha U'Voecha, Me'ata V'Yad Olam. Good evening, everyone. Just want to share a general sketch of the schedule for this evening. Just started with a parak of Tehillim, and we look forward to sharing plans as we look forward to 2020, 2021, followed with some questions after that presentation. And we will have, again, an update from Dr. Rocker, to whom we express our gratitude tonight, as always, and to the entire medical team for their outstanding and remarkable support over the course of these few months. I would like to begin. Our goal for this evening is to turn our attention together with you to this coming September, to looking forward to the next year, 2020, 2021, Tafshin Pei Aleph. We reflect back on these past couple of months. I would say it as follows. I think that we have, as an institution prior to this, thanks to an awesome staff in SAR Academy and high school, been able to figure out the mode of learning in school in normal circumstances, as we have done over the past 50 years, and that's been one mode. And a little bit over 2 months ago, we as a community needed to pivot dramatically and shift to a very different mode of learning, and that was a Zoom platform, and everybody has been in that kind of online space over the course of the past couple of months. As we've said so many times, the dedication and commitment and kind of everyone's all in spirit, that is faculty, administration, students, parents, to be able to make this time as purposeful and as productive as possible, that has been a beautiful thing to see. We all acknowledge that on the one hand, probably better than we imagined it to be, and on the other hand, it was also full with different kinds of challenges. But we know what to do and how to operate in those two modes. As we look towards September, we have over the past weeks embraced the reality that we are in, and we are very strongly committed to being in school, in SAR Academy and high school next year, and planning for that to happen. We do believe that in order to make ourselves ready, what is vital is for us to develop a plan that is a third mode of operation. If on the one hand, we know what school is like when we're all in, and we know what school is like now when we're on Zoom, we are intensely involved in planning for a social distancing life in school. What we are going to do tonight is to share with you some of the broad sketches of our plan so that we are fully ready for school in September, for whatever circumstance will present itself to us. If you're just looking at the slide here, I think that in our collective minds, the idea would be to have 3 modes within which we can operate, and should we need to be able to switch from one to the other, which is 1, being in school, as we know so well, to create a social distance platform where students can come to school every day, but much further spread out. And what we'd like to share with you tonight is some of the plans for how we'll use the space in order to make that happen. And if required, and for certain purposes, to still take advantage of what the Zoom platform offers us. I want to be absolutely clear that our commitments are to comply with CDC guidelines, our local government regulations as we are directed by New York State, and the guidance, as you'll hear this evening, of our medical team, in order to make sure that we are, on the one hand, showing our very strong commitment to being present in school and learning as much as possible, but in a way that ensures the safety and good health of all of our students. And so we want to share some of our plans for social distancing at SAR. As my colleague, Rabbi Kroll, has coined this, we have worked very, very hard with the guidance of Dr. Acker and team to flatten the curve. And we have actually made collective progress in that. And on this front, we are trying to get ahead of a curve to be able to get ourselves ready for any kind of learning that we possibly, that will kind of strengthen our collective school experience. Rabbi Krauss will begin with focusing on the academy. Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi Hartstark. Thank you all for coming. Obviously, I think that, the biggest question that we've gotten over the last couple of weeks, as we knew that this year was, we were not coming back to the building, is, okay, what's the plan for September, aside from what's happened with summer camps, which I would say we are blessed to not have to be actively making those decisions, although we certainly are following them and care about them and care about our kids and making sure that they have a safe and productive summer, however that's possible. What the slides that I'm going to share with you are pretty much identical to what I shared with our faculty this past Friday. And in terms of the broad guidelines, Rabbi Hartstark and I and Rabbi Kroll have been in regular conversation, obviously committed to following the state guidelines. We are committed to running the school in September in our buildings, and that's what we'd like to do. Obviously, that will only be possible as long as the government allows it, but we think that that's the direction it's going. We believe that the 70,000 square feet of new space that we've built over the past 6 years, including 34,000 square feet of our ELC, which is within 30 days of completion now, will allow us to create an environment which is certainly not what we're used to, but it's also not what we've been used to over the last couple of months. One of the things that I spoke to our teachers about is trying to move our planning from like making the plan B, plan A, so to speak. In other words, instead of just continuing to plan for a regular year, which we know it will not exactly be, but to plan for a different kind of year, but one that will allow us to maximize the, have all the kids in the building every day, God willing. And if things radically change and we could just go back to regular, so we'll do a lot of similar groupings. And but our planning from now until September is going to be based on the contingencies that we think are most likely. The other thing that we're trying to do is to not just wait. It's very hard to just wait for guidance that sometimes comes in trickles, comes in slowly, comes in and then is changed. So really to kind of use our best judgment based on the information that we have, seeing what we're seeing in other places, and knowing that maybe 25% or more of the things that we say will have to be tweaked. If our numbers are wrong, if the number is not 12 but 14 or not 12 but 10, then we'll have to deal with that. We asked our teachers, and I will say, and I want to thank them, I know there are a lot of faculty on, but the response of faculty to what we put forward a couple of days ago was very positive, understanding that they're going to be the ones who are going to be radically flexible in terms of ensuring our success. Their job descriptions are going to change, our space usage is going to change. Change will pretty much be our theme of the year, but we really want to make sure that we can get kids into the buildings. We anticipate that movement will likely be significantly limited. There's a lot of movement in SAR. There are not too many walls in SAR, so we're used to moving around a lot from area to area, from space to space, on the steps, all kinds of different directions. That is going to be limited, that is going to be challenging, and that's what we're focusing on. We think it's unlikely that our teams, that our after school, that our special programs will take place as usual. We understand that that's unlikely to happen, although again, we would be thrilled if somehow it can happen. Maybe over the course of the year, more can happen. We still anticipate learning from the technology that we've been using and using Zoom for meetings, using Zoom for gatherings, for students who might not be able to be physically present for all the time, or for some of the older students if we have a truncated day, which we can talk about, and then moving over to Zoom for a portion of the instruction. But again, for the bulk of the day, the bulk of the year, the bulk of every day to be in the building, to be in school. To drill down to some details, and I know I'm going to be going quickly, and again, these things are likely to change, but the concept is basically groups of 10 to 12 in our building. So probably the ELC in the first grade, 24 to 28 groups of 10 to 12 in the new building. Which has big classroom, which has obviously, again, areas that were not designed. We didn't anticipate there were going to be classrooms, but they will become classrooms so that we can have groups of 10 to 12 with 2 teachers. Same thing in the lower schools, so grades 2 through 5, 32 to 35 groups of 10 to 12 in the main building, and the middle school, 20 to 24 groups of 10 to 12 in the main building. Like I said, that number can change based on the guidance that we get, but we believe it to be close. Sinai will still be occupying 4 spaces in our main building. We intend to give precedence to children learning. My office, the business office, every office that we have, those spaces that we need to be able to get groups in the building to be learning together, that's what they're going to be used for. So likely some walls will be coming down, certainly some furniture will be coming out. Working with a team of architects, we have Hila Stern and Esther Sperber, both parents in the school who have been very, very generous to date. And they're going to be pretty busy over the next couple of months working with us to make sure that we can do this right. I'll show you a little bit of sketches very quickly, but basically, if you think of the areas that we have, not every area is the same, but if you think of the class areas that we have, which normally house 4 classes, so we're talking about up to 96 kids in an area, that's going to go down by about half. So you're talking about between 40 and 50 kids in an area that normally had 96. We've identified 12 groups that could meet in the middle school areas. We have those rooms behind the lunchroom that were built a couple of years ago. Other rooms at the bottom of the building, the annex, that's all right off of the field. Again, some of you are more familiar with some of these spaces than others, but then repurposing other spaces, office of the principal, business office, teachers' rooms, gyms, if necessary, and lunchrooms to be able to accommodate groups of 12 who will basically be in their groups with 2 teachers for much of the time. Again, obviously, depending on what the guidance is, we would tweak that a little bit. I hope that this won't become necessary, but it might be additional off-campus space. Right now, we don't think that will be necessary, but we're open to that if that's what it requires. Just to give you a little bit of a sketch, if you're looking at space, so these are spaces over here that normally had double or triple the number of students. So really drilling down and minimizing the number of students that are in a grade. And basically the concept is that these 12 almost become a family of 12, and they're spending all of their time together, so that if we have cases, that we would be able to isolate them, trace them, etc., and make sure that everybody's taken care of and everybody is safe. This is a little bit of a bigger area, so we've identified more space. The library will be taken over, and again, pretty much every area that was for 100 is going to be for about 50, roughly. And these are still being developed. The other thing that our architects are thinking about are bathrooms, really designated bathroom areas for each group of kids or 2 groups of kids, designated cleaning staff for each area, so that really becomes part of the team. And and they're there and they're around and they're living kind of in one area or 2 areas, so that these kids can be taken care of, and we can be encouraging hygiene, making sure that this disinfection is taking place on a regular basis, etc. We might have to re-equip some of our sinks and Purell dispensers and things like that, and that's all what's being thought about as the building is mapped out. Very briefly, in terms of schedule, it's basically, the concept is basically for everyone moving to a homeroom model for all classes. So it'll be 2 teachers and 12 kids. And what could happen is that there might be, again, if the rules are that you could switch, the teachers can move between classes, that will happen on a more regular basis. If the rule is that it can't, then it might be every 6 weeks, where you have, for example, let's say in 3rd grade, you have a head teacher and an assistant teacher. but that's a general studies teacher, Judaic studies teacher, but then after 6 weeks, they flip so that you have a head Judaic studies teacher and an assistant general studies teacher. The teachers will be working closely with each other. They'll be leading each other, especially some of the assistant teachers and those who are coming in relatively new. We'll have leaders working with them on professionally develop them and work with them so that they can be all working on the same curriculum, but there will be a lot of kids working in small groups, 12, basically 12 on 2. Cross-pollination is what I was talking about before in terms of the ability for teachers to move from one group to another. That's going to depend on the guidance that we do not yet have. We anticipate that fields and playgrounds will be allocated across the day. We also probably imagine that there's going to have to be some kind of staggered arrival and staggered dismissal. These times are not exact, but they're kind of, that's what's in our heads right now. 8 o'clock to 9:30, staggered arrival, 2:30 to 4 o'clock, staggered dismissal. Not sure whether we'll have opportunities or possibilities for aftercare beyond those hours, because that would involve mixing groups again, which is what we're trying to stay away from. So this is kind of the big picture, again, with lots of tweaks, et cetera. I think most of the things that are on this slide, I spoke about already, 2 teachers per group. It is possible or likely that specialty teachers will be assigned to groups as well, that there might be some self-contained classes that are smaller than 12. We also know that there are teachers who won't be allowed to come back, and those teachers will need to work remotely, and we'll have to work within those constraints. We know that teachers will be teaching subjects that they haven't necessarily taught before, recently, or grades that they're not necessarily prepared to teach for next year, but those things will likely have to change. We're working on building a transition team because there are so many different balls in the air at the same time. So administrators, communications, physical, plant, medical, we can talk about that a little bit later. I'm sorry for talking so fast, but I want to get back to Rabbi Hartstark, and then of course answering lots of unanswered questions, perhaps some which will come up later tonight. Rabbi Hartstark, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rabbi Kras. Just explain the concept in the high school. I think that the broadest principles are actually the same across the institution, but some of the way in which it will take shape will be different based on the needs of high school students, both academically and socially. So what we'd like to ensure, and our plan is to set up a program which will allow for the excellent and strong learning experience that we've come to expect, which on a high school level means students being able to learn on a level that works for them. And we are counting on having a program where kids are learning on their appropriate levels in their classrooms. There will be more movement in the high school than there would be in the lower school in order to allow that. And we are planning for groupings as usual to have the SLC, but in a lot of things in different locations in order to the hope of maximizing all spaces that are available in the building. What that means is that from the time they come into the building, they will be going to specific locations that will be geared towards half a grade. Just to give you an example of how that would be working is that we'll take advantage of the bottom floor, which includes the gym, hockey rink, and classrooms at the end, in order to be able to fit approximately half a grade on that level, creating spaces that will work on that floor and allow kids to stay in place within those locations and have teachers move from place to place in those areas. And for example, the second floor, if you're familiar with the high school building, where there is a Beit Midrash, a Beit Knesset, a library, and a Siach space, all of those will essentially become single classrooms to allow for classes to take place in a spread out and socially distanced kind of way. We are assuming approximately half a grade of students on a level in a way that they can be, again, spread out, and will be more or less limited in their movement to the floor that they are on, and for classes who will basically stay where they are. The plan would be to create a very precise social distance plan that will allow students to enter through the various entrances that are available. There is a side entrance to the gym. There are main entrances to the staircase. There's a rear entrance. There's an entrance that will go to the annex area, and each of those will become an area on its own. The annex classrooms can hold half a grade. The main floor areas will be redesigned so that each will be able to hold approximately, our plan right now is for 3 classes in a socially distanced manner, where walls will be redesigned in order to allow for those to happen. And so if we are using the gym and the first floor, and that will contain a grade, and the kids will basically stay in those locations and spread out. The annex as another, the center areas in floors 3, 4, 5, and 6. And we are also, as Rabbi Krauss mentioned, looking for outside space right in the neighborhood should that become necessary. And we plan to lay all of that out very precisely, both in terms of how you enter and exiting the building, as well as which staircases students use. And part of the goal of putting our medical team together for this is to be able to establish protocols for entry, exit, moving through the building, staying put for most of the day, but just moving when necessary. For example, for lunch, students will stay put basically where they are. And we plan to keep the class sizes within the range of, to create enough space to have classes of 20, 22, which is our approximate range, is what we should, what we'd like to continue with. Rabbi, I don't know what I got next.
More?
Yes, thank you. No, it's good. Our plan is to design a co-curricular program. We're going to go through each and every club that we have and determine. It is unlikely, I mean, we're assuming at this point that athletic competition is likely. We do want to have a co-curricular program, and for those purposes, there are certain things that could happen in a socially distanced way in the building, again, assuming that we have permission to do so, and in accordance with guidelines. We also would like to maximize Zoom opportunities in order to broaden the scope. The world has gotten a lot smaller. For those of you who are following the high school schedule, Rabbi Krul's put together the SAR Cares program that has allowed people from different places to address us from wherever they are in the world. We are going to take advantage of those opportunities to create an SAR Cares 2.0 that will enrich the co-curricular program. It will be some will be the same, some will be different, but we're committed to spending the next 4 months strengthening that program and taking advantage of the way in which Zoom has made the world smaller, in addition to having the clubs that we are able to have. We also are going to reorganize sometime on Friday to allow part of what the high school experience requires is to allow the larger communal events. And we'd like to kind of redesign Friday in some measure in order to allow that to happen. To be clear, we're in kind of the first 10 days of our focusing on what will be the intense work of the next 4 months in order to get ourselves ready for this plan. We can do it, and our faith in our faculty in making all of this happen, being able to design this, both in terms of hygiene and the academic program, it is the most important thing, and we're going to make it work. There are many questions that need to be answered. The idea this evening is for us to do a general sketch, just to point to a couple of things that are those questions around by the transportation, and then you can take it from there after that. But the transportation is an enormous question. We have the meetings are scheduled to talk to work with the bus companies, but the question of how buses can work, I don't, from a social distancing perspective, small buses don't work. Larger buses with much fewer students can work. Question about carpools and how those can happen, but that is a question for all of us, which we're gonna have to both work very hard on figuring out the best plan that we can, and also watching and listening to guidelines and as circumstances change over the next number of months. But that is, transportation is a very large question for which we don't yet have a clear answer, but we will be working towards. Rabbi.
Thank you. And you know, I think Rabbi Kroll said it well in the chat before. I'd love to say that we're not going to take all the questions because we don't have time. We're also not going to take all the questions because we don't know the answers. So there are lots of questions that we have asked, that you are asking, that clearly need to be, you know, to be more thoroughly addressed. And we understand that. Rabbi Hartzak spoke about transportation. In terms of medical, everything that you see on this slide is real, is important, is going to be a key to being able to come back. That's monitoring in terms of temperature monitoring, in terms of testing, regular testing, isolating when we have to, proper hygiene, and the ability to do that. PPE, which we know there's going to be a run on, and we're actually working on now, and even with other schools, to make sure that we can get it. Developing these new guidelines and enforcing those guidelines and communicating guidelines, frankly, in a culture where there's been a lot more freedom than, you know, than some level of rigidity that we're going to have to get used to, at least for a period of time. I do want to address some of the questions that have come up. The question about how these groups will be grouped. I mean, we'd like these groups of 12 definitely to be co-ed and to be mixed in terms of, you know, heterogeneous classing is something that we deeply believe in. So that might mean, as it does already for some of the bigger classes that we have, that you're in a heterogeneous class, but there are groupings for certain things, for math or for things like that. Hopefully that will continue. We'd like to really, you know, be true to the things that we believe in terms of, you know, how we develop this. I actually think, and one of the things that's been most inspiring to me and to the administrators over the last couple of days has been the excitement that some of these teachers have taken on, kind of stretching themselves and learning new things. And, you know, school can look a little bit different. You know, if there's an 8 to 9:30 time where kids are coming in because they're supposed to be coming in at different times, and you got to get used to that. And then you're working with the same group of kids for group of 12 for, you know, for 5 or 6 hours. That's a different kind of work. That's not period 1, period 2, period 3, but that looks different, feels different, and hopefully, you know, we'll learn a lot from that, and we'll gain a lot from that, even, you know, kind of even going forward. The busing questions that you're asking are big. We don't
Rabbi
obviously. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
If I can for a second on the grouping question in the high school, because it's a bit different.
Sure.
The idea would be, and this is again a sketch of the, you know, the kind of the principle of the idea, but we'll have to work out the details, is that if approximately half a grade is located on a floor, those students can move within those classes. The assumption is not that students are in a group. We will try to create groups that can stick together for much of the day, but we are at this point not assuming that students will not move at all. They will and must move in a socially distanced kind of way. We will try to minimize that movement, but we will also try to allow for some movement in order for students to be in the sections that make most sense for them. We will try to limit the movement, certainly between grades, in a significant way, and even between half grades in some measure, such that while we will not have pods of 12, we'll have larger groups. But if, again, God forbid, if someone takes ill, it would not affect the entire population, and there should be some containment there. I'll just answer lunch and then hand it back to you because it was raised. As far as the high school is concerned, because lunch is independent, that is, students either bring their own or go outside. Students will not be going outside during this period until we're back to normal. And our assumption is that lunch will be at students' desks. Kids bring their own lunch. It should be social time, but in a distanced kind of way. That's how lunch will happen in the high school.
In terms of the academy, coming back, thank you. The lunch question, and then going backwards a little bit. Right now, we are anticipating to have lunch. Probably not in the lunchroom. Probably delivered to class areas. But we are planning on having lunch included, at least for the 4 days that we've had lunch for the last number of years. How can parents help us? Thank you for our Stern family. That's a very fine and appreciated question. You can help us by what you're doing, by encouraging and, you know, working with us and giving us the positive feedback that we really, really deeply appreciate. So thank you for Thank you for that. Yes, definitely students' commute times will be taken into consideration when planning the staggered arrivals and dismissals. And we don't think that the school day should end at 2:30 for everyone. So we need to figure out how to do that. We don't want that to be the case. But we also know that if we're moving, you know, in our case, 950 kids, they can't move together at the same time if we're having a socially distant program where you're basically spending the day in groups of 12. So we need to figure that out. And we are committed to communicating that with you as we try to figure it out. Questions about therapies, OT, speech, of course, those are important questions. They're good questions. Again, in the Academy's case, the big advantage we have is the amount of space that we've picked up. Doesn't mean we'll be able to do everything, but we do hope that we'll be able to do most of it, even though it will likely look quite different from what kids are used to and have been used to.
We will assume also in the high school that the SLC will be functioning. We have not determined. We will have many spaces of appropriate size for SLC type learning, but we'll have to figure out how those, where those spaces will be. But we do plan on SLC functioning for next year.
Yes, and we look forward to the Nachmani Dippin' Dot machine on Purim. That's where we're in. We're totally in for that. Again, we will certainly, as Rabbi Cole said, we'll actually take all these questions from the chat and make sure that we have them so that we can, and please understand, I mean, as I said to the teachers the other day, a lot of this might change. Certainly the numbers might change, the spaces might change. We're really, as Rabbi Hartzog said, probably 10 days into thinking about this and 3 or 4 days into putting it into writing and starting to plan in earnest. Yes, this program is happening as usual. We anticipate that everybody will be in these smaller groups and kind of limited to those groups for the whole time. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you to Dr. Rocker. It's been 2 weeks, so we know that there are some updates on the medical front. We're going into 2 holiday weekends. And that means a lot of outdoor time and a lot of potential outdoor time and potential getting together and what's kosher and what's not kosher, and give it to us straight, and hopefully you'll have some good news for us. Thank you. Josh, you're up. Yeah, there you go.
Myself, there we go. Hi, how are you? I have heard you speak fast before. I do not think I've ever heard you speak that fast. That was pretty impressive.
I wanted to get to you. We just have to get to you.
I don't think anyone is going to pay attention to me. They are still formulating questions for you. Thank you guys very much for inviting me again. I'm here to give the update. And the update is not a tremendous amount has changed. The hospitals are definitely doing better insofar as the admission numbers are in general not as high as the discharge numbers. So the absolute number of patients in hospitals are going down. They have, one thing that we are seeing an increase in now are patients coming in who are sicker, who are non-COVID, meaning people who have been at home sort of potentially neglecting their health, not getting to doctors, not coming to the hospital because they think that the hospitals aren't safe, and they're coming in now with uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled hypertension, uncontrolled other medical issues. So what I want to stress to people on this on the Zoom, and to, for them to stress to their family members as well, hospitals are safe at this point. And what I mean by that, and I have evidence to prove that, is healthcare workers who are working in the hospital environment are not having a much higher antibody test rate versus the general public. So I could tell you at Northwell, it's around 13%, which is consistent with the area in which the employees come from. So for those who are working with COVID patients, PPE is working for them and they are not getting infected. And we also know that patient to patient, it's really not spreading. So if you need to go to the emergency department, if you need to see a doctor, please go. They are taking precautions at all those sites. And obviously when you're there, you have to also take precautions yourself, wash hands, while you're there. But please do not avoid your own medical issues. And if you are in communication with the elderly who are concerned, please sort of, give them the sort of sense, the urgency is what we're seeing now is people are not taking care of themselves. So please, please, please take care of yourselves, get to doctors if you need to. In regards to this pediatric entity that we're seeing, it was initially called Pediatric Multisystem Inflammatory Syndrome, PMIS. The CDC kind of renamed it the MIS-C, Multisystem Inflammatory Syndrome in children. They are seeing very little of it on adults. It's mostly a pediatric thing. And there's not that much different that I can add from the last time that we spoke, except we're not seeing it so much anymore. The peak probably was 10 days ago in New York, where we were seeing multiple patients a day. And I would say now at the busiest centers, maybe we're seeing one a day, which makes a total for New York City, maybe 150, 160 cases. So that's, again, keep everything in perspective. It's not that much relative to the adult disease that we're seeing. And what this multi-system inflammatory syndrome is not active COVID disease. It is, you had COVID, it generally passed, and now this is around 3-4 weeks later when your immune system just kind of goes a little haywire. It can come with a rash, oftentimes with GI symptoms. But if you have a rash or GI symptoms and not fever, do not be so concerned. It is, in general, greater than 3 days, much more specifically 4 days with fever. And then other symptoms that may be there are rash, which could be just red, any type of rash. GI symptoms, which could be, stomach ache, diarrhea, more so than vomiting. And those are the main findings that you can see. You may have headache, you may have body aches, but the fever and the rash, you may have conjunctivitis, you may have a little bit of swelling of your lymph nodes. Those are the most sort of classic findings right now, but we're not seeing so much of it. Luckily, it has passed. What we are concerned about is the second wave, right? So we know that whenever we ease social distancing, there will be a little bit more disease. And then with that, we know around 4 weeks after the peak of that, that's when we'll start seeing some of the pediatric stuff. Right now, things are looking pretty good. In regards to the indicators that the Department of Health are using to determine when can we just, relax a little bit, there are 3 major indicators. One of them is the number of patients that test positive in New York, not the number, sorry, the percentage of patients who test positive in New York. As long as we're below 15%, we're good. We are below 15%. We're at 11% now. The other is hospital admissions being, for COVID, being at a lower number. And we're actually very below the number that they want. What we are not at is the availabilities of ICU beds. So we are seeing ICU beds being filled again with COVID patients that have long admissions. Patients can be there for weeks. And we're now also seeing ICU beds being occupied with patients who just have other medical conditions. And so that's the one major indicator, and we're not even that close to meeting that indicator. We're probably a few weeks before meeting that, before they decide to totally open up. Or to lessen some of the restrictions. So getting to the lessening of the restrictions, based upon what I just said, the Department of Health is not going to be advocating for doing it right now, but they are still advocating for people to go outside, get their exercise, and what people are asking is, hey, and not just asking what we're seeing, what people are doing. They're going out, they're going to neighbors' homes, they are practicing hopefully social distancing. And so the question sort of asked to the medical team is, hey guys, what do you think about that? And gals, doctors. So the answer to that is complicated, as all these answers are. So clearly we don't want to advocate anything the Department of Health is not advocating, and still their baseline is please stay home when you can. We understand the need in the nice weather and the desires to get outside. And so I think, and there is varying degree of people, opinions on this matter. But I think I could somewhat safely say, if there is a small gathering, when I say small, I don't even want to say gathering. If there are individuals, who get together. So I'm not saying like, hey, our friends, or my son wants to get together with 5 of his friends. I don't think that's necessarily a wise idea, nor is anyone advocating that, because we know the larger the group, the more chaotic it is going to be. So if we're talking about a structured small group that can really be watched by parents or people who are responsible, and not just responsible, but will intervene and say, hey guys, put on the mask. Hey guys, separate. Then I think a small gathering, 1-2 people is probably fine, additional people. When it comes to families getting together for Shabbat, we should not be having dinners together. We should not be having lunches together. But can you be at someone's backyard, a good distance, away from each other? I think a very, very safe distance. Again, we talk about the 6 feet, for 6 minutes. So if you're hanging out for an hour, then you just have to really, increase your distance. So if you are 10, 15 feet away from each other and scattered, I think having one family with another is probably okay. But again, you have to be responsible. You should be wearing masks during this time. Everyone should be wearing masks. And that is not, again, just to reiterate, someone coughs, someone sneezes, that is spreading. So I think we have to be thoughtful, and we have to recognize and start really thinking and preparing and educating ourselves and educating our children, because there is going to be a relaxing of the social distancing and the regulations in the next few weeks down the road. It is not going to be binary. It's not going to be on or off. It is going to be, we're going to open up a little bit. And so we should practice the conversation with our children and with other loved ones, how that's going to be. Now, the other important factor is, if we're talking about children, it's one thing. If we are talking about getting together with the elderly, getting together with those with risk factors, it is a totally different ball of wax. Still, if there are people who are high risk, and those are going to be the elderly, those with obesity, those with hypertension, then I do not recommend gathering with those people at all. Now, you have to understand, if you're letting your children, get together in a group of 1 or 2 additional others, and then they are going to see, grandparents a little bit later, that's irresponsible. So if visits are going to be happening, then you have to be very thoughtful about decision-making in regards to that. So I think that's probably the main things I want to say.
Dr. Rocker, very specific question, which I think a lot of people are asking. Outside visits with grandparents, okay? Question mark. Sorry.
So that is, it's a difficult question. Outside is better than inside, 100%. And I think getting together with grandparents, again, has the benefit, the mental health benefit for the grandparents as well as the children. But you have to recognize, if you have little ones who are going to run and jump on their laps, then it should not happen. If you really can regulate it, and it is something, if it's something that can be regulated, I think outdoors, small group, very, very, significant distance with masks probably is okay, but you got to know your crowd. You got to know the people, and, if the dog's going to run over, the kids are going to run over, then no, you can't do it.
Okay. And I think you answered the other question. Outside masks, if you're socially distancing with your group of whatever legitimate friends are, 10 feet, masks are still on?
Masks always.
Outside?
Masks.
Oh, masks always. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, you might have been in the middle. I just threw in some questions at you. And they want to know what you think about the vaccine. Today's news.
Today's news is going to be, we need to take time, right? You know, the last vaccine, took, I believe it was 4 years to make. So I don't think we should have expectations that this is going to happen immediately. We have to be,
Okay.
there has to be lots and lots of testing before it is initiated.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rocker. Questions about camps. I think we're going to leave to camps. I do know that some camps continue to be sending out information. Are still holding out hope. And
I saw an antibody question. I don't know if you want me to address that.
Go ahead, sure.
Sure. In regards to antibody testing, there are lots of different antibody tests. And when I say that, I don't mean just different manufacturers. They are looking at different antibodies that attack different parts of the virus. And because of that, we don't definitively know which one is the most effective, which antibody is the most effective. And to repeat, we don't completely understand how much immunity the antibody actually, if you are positive, confers to you. Like, so how immune are you? We don't, if you have it tested on day 1, I don't know if day 10 you still have antibody in your system. We suspect that you do, but we're not exactly sure. We know antibodies last for a month or so, but are they being regenerated at a reliable rate? So we don't know how reliable they are to offer you immunity. So one thing that people ask me is like, hey, I know I had it. I now have an antibody. Can I hang out with grandma? And the thought is, yes, you have greater protection than someone else, but we don't, at this point, fully understand how much immunity you have and for how long. So yes, it's a good thing if you have antibodies. We just don't know how long it lasts, and more information needs to be given to that question. And that's why I've suggested in the past, if you're going to be tested, please be tested within the framework of research so that we can learn more about it and then more appropriately inform people what to do.
Dr. Rocker, thank you as always. I want to go back to a couple of questions to give back to Rabbi Hartstock, if there are things that you found in there. There's a question about bus refunds that a lot of people have asked. Yes, we actually did successfully, thank God, negotiate with the bus companies. And we will be giving bus refunds for the time that private buses, people are paying for private busing. That is part of the calculations that are being made. And we will be in touch with you in June in terms of being able to refund fee-for-service money, including a significant portion of the bus expense. There's also a question about testing in school. We believe that there will be testing in school. Exactly what form that will take, how often, whether it's it's something that the school kind of finds the avenues for people to be doing, or we actually do it in school, is a question. We have very good relationships with some of the local labs, and we have great parents, the Altholzers, who have been very helpful with us in general, with flu shots and things like that. And they've I don't know if they're on, but thank you for everything that you do for SAR, and we know that we are going to be counting on your guidance when it comes to testing, because you know a lot about it. The number 12, somebody asked where we got the number 12 from. As I said, that is not a formal number. There were some initial CDC numbers that we think kind of came out with that, but it's definitely not official, and I understand that it could go up, it could go down, it can change. The question about masks in school is an interesting one, where and again, this is very early, but what I have seen is that they're suggesting that kids younger than probably middle elementary school maybe should not be wearing masks all day. And we're going to again get the right guidance between now and September earlier to make sure that we're doing the right things, and how we look at when the kids are in those groups of 12, how they interact with each other, and how we're kind of viewing that group of 12 is going to be an important question. And some of the questions that you asked, which are important as well, when they leave that bubble and they go interact with other people, then how is the bubble protected, et cetera. So those are important questions, as the ones that continue to be coming in, which we will be working on, and God willing, communicating to you over the course of the summer. And even before that, we're looking at graduations, which we haven't spoken about, but hoping to have meaningful graduations, and certainly to communicate with you as those plans become clearer to us. Rabbi Hartstock.
I don't think that I have anything. Rabbi Kroll responded to a number of the questions in the chat. Thank you, Rabbi Kroll, for that. I think there was a question that was raised about the gap year in Israel. I think that the assumption of those programs, so that still, since Israel is where it is in this process, a step ahead, assuming that they, God willing, will continue. I think that there's a lot of optimism that those programs are going to happen, but we're certainly monitoring that as well. And I think that that's it. I think otherwise, thank you, Rabbi Kroll, for your responses there.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for hopefully it was an informative night, and we look forward to continuing it. Next week is Memorial Day, and then Shavuos. So we'll get back together. I think 2 weeks from tonight, right? So 2 weeks from tonight, Monday night, will be our next town hall. And thank you all. Have a wonderful night. Thank you, Dr. Rocker.